The last place I thought I was going to be 1 week ago was back here. As you can see, the stuff's out off the walls. The computers have been boxed up. Today was the day we were going to turn the keys into the landlord and leave the headquarters for good. And I still don't know how to describe the power of what's happened. I left town, I went on vacation last week, I turned off my phone, I turned off my computer, and I cut off from the world, and really took a break for the first time in a long time. And when I turned them back on Monday, there were hundreds of Facebook messages, emails, texts, phone messages saying, "We want to write you in. We're going to write you in whether you let us do it or not." Cindy Paskey, the director of the president of strategic staffing, did a big announcement at Pancakes and Politics that she was writing me in, and everybody started writing. And then so many of our volunteers just kept going. And you're going to get a chance to meet Pat Shelton. But Pat Shelton and Peggy Noble are so typical. We got 4,700 volunteers in this campaign, and they were virtually all generated from house parties. And last fall, I was over at the Fenmore Block Club. This is the way this campaign has gone, over near 7 Mile and Southfield. And my friend Pat, are you here somewhere, Pat? Oh, here, Pat. There you go. Pat, I went in. She was an officer with this very skeptical look on her face about why is this guy here and what's he talking about. And at the end of it, I said, if anybody wants to do a house party, I'll come out to your neighborhood. She hosted a house party where she made everybody spaghetti, and we sat around, and we talked last fall. And then for me to read that she and Peggy Noble and that group were out doing protests and waving signs saying, "Honk if you want Mike Duggan to write in," and just, it's like when a candidate gets out of a race, in my business, people just go on to the next candidate. It's no big deal. You forget about the guy that's gone. I did not expect this kind of a reaction, and I heard from so many of the 160 people that hosted me at the house parties that their friends and their neighbors are saying, what are we going to do? We wanted to decide this for ourselves. We didn't want judges taking away our right to vote. Can't we do something on the write-in campaign? And so I came down here on Wednesday, cut the vacation short. Brian Barnhill, my campaign manager, said I was going to meet with a few people. This room had about 50 people in it who were saying, we can do this. And here's Peggy Noble, Pat's sidekick from the Fenmore Club. And so she's been the lady on TV getting all the people to honk on the street the past week to get me to do this. But the other thing is I looked at the newspaper, what's happened in the last week? I said, you know, this city, the leadership, it's so unstable. You know, I don't have a criticism of Kevin Orr. I think Kevin Orr is doing as fine a job as any emergency manager can do. But the emergency manager form of government is unstable by its nature. We've lost a third of the Detroit City Council since I was stood here a week ago. I mean, for 3 different reasons. That's never happened in Detroit's history. And while you have an emergency manager who is focused on the short-term financials, you've got people now trying to lay out long-term restructuring for city departments that's going to be affecting the city for years to come. This is not right. And you know, Detroiters right now are not in charge of city government, they're not in charge of their schools, they're no longer in charge of the 36th District Court. It just seems like there is no semblance of self-determination. And I look at what's happening and I think to myself, we have got to have a mayor who can move the emergency manager out and transition back to elected leadership that selects. Other candidates in the race, I really believe if one of them's elected, we're going to have an emergency manager for the next 4 or 5 years. I just think we're going to be stuck in that situation. And also in the last week, you just saw Hamtramck, which went through an emergency manager, came out of it, just got put back under an emergency manager again. We have to have a mayor who has dealt with bankruptcy, has dealt with crisis, can do a turnaround and run this city professionally. And if the voters of Detroit think that person is me, I'm going to go out and campaign as hard as I can for that. People in this room asked me a week ago, are you going to do a write-in? And a write-in is very difficult for two reasons, and we're going to show you the ballot in a second. One of the problems is there's no instructions on the ballot to tell you how to write in, which means that we need to educate the voters before they walk into the polls. That's very difficult. Second is that everything we do in terms of TV and radio and mail, where I'd like to talk about my plan for rebuilding this community in partnership with the people, you got to take away from your basic message. You got to spend a lot of time explaining the process. That's a very challenging thing to do. But I've looked at reality. The reality is this: we're not running to run number one in the primary. If you finish in the top two in the primary, you're on the ballot in November. Yes. And so we have a goal now to finish number two, and we estimate that between 60 and 80,000 people are going to vote in this primary on August 6th. 25% will win at least second place, and that's between 15 and 20,000 voters. And when you start with 4,700 volunteers in your database, it seems like 15 to 20,000 is a doable option, and then I've got an even shot at whoever else comes through in the November election.
For a write-in candidate, there's a form you have to submit. Can you talk about that?
Yes, there is. It is a declaration of intent for a write-in candidate. I will be filing it on Monday, July 1st. And as by now you know, I am the world's expert on the city charter. The deadline actually to file is July 28th. But as you all know, the charter says that your filing has to be at least 1 year after you're a registered voter. So I was a registered voter April 16th of 2012, and I will file as a write-in candidate July 1st of 2013. This filing will be more than 1 year. But the law of both the state and the city provides that if you do not file the declaration of intent, the write-ins are not counted. And so we will be doing that on Monday.
Mike, do you think that your candidacy and getting back into this race is going to bring out voters who maybe have been a bit apathetic over maybe recent elections?
You know, I can't believe how angry people were that the judges took away their right to vote.
That's right.
Detroiters have been denied their rights to the electoral process in so many different ways in recent years, but this one seemed to infuriate people. And certainly, I contributed to it in not holding on to the signature for 2 weeks, but I think there was a sense across this community that the right of people to decide for themselves wasn't being respected. And based on what I'm seeing, I think there are going to be a lot of people energized that maybe weren't. There appears to be much more energy today than there was a week ago. So apparently, Tom Barrow did me a favor.
What has to happen after August? There seems to be a lot of euphoria right now as people dive back into this enthusiasm and this well of positivity and optimism. There's some real fighting that needs to happen here. What are the biggest challenges moving forward from August for you?
Well, you know, I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. We got to go put the house parties back on the calendar. We're going back to the churches again. But, you know, I have been in every corner of this city. And we need to roll out the plan that we had intended to roll out by now, but we lost 2 weeks, where we're going to lay out a very specific plan of how we're going to rebuild this city together. And I think when people see the substance of the plan and how we're going to reduce police response times, get the street lights on, get abandoned buildings occupied, not just demolished, and these things are, and bring jobs and businesses back, when people see these things are achievable, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement. Certainly that's been my experience in the house parties over the last year. But I got to go one step at a time. Right now, I got to get 50 to 20,000 people to care enough to not just fill in the oval for somebody else, they need to write Mike Duggan in the blank and fill in the oval next to my name.
Where else have you seen something like this happen in a major American city?
Tony Williams, the mayor of Washington DC in 2002, got knocked off the ballot because the company he hired turned in fraudulent signatures. And he ran a write-in campaign for his reelection and was reelected easily. Of course, the national example is Lisa Murkowski, the U.S. Senator from Alaska, who got beat by a Tea Party candidate in the primary and waged a very effective write-in campaign and won the election in the general. She used wristbands. She had a far more difficult name to spell than mine. But she had wristbands that people wore, so they had the name right and knew how to fill it out. And we're looking at that. We're talking to people from the Murkowski campaign right now as to how they staged that so successfully. But there aren't many examples of it being done.
And then voter turnout. You know, you talk about the city of Detroit there, known across the country in the dubious light of having such low voter turnout. We talk about voter rights all the time when it's time to protest. When it comes to election day, unless you have a presidential election, people don't head out. How do you think that's going to fare? And is this a different time in your mind?
Well, we're going to have to see. You know, you had 300,000 people vote in the presidential election in the city, and 100,000 people vote in the last mayoral election. When people believe they have a choice that's going to make a difference in their lives, they come out of their homes and vote.
That's right.
And
That's
so,
right.
they were willing to come out for Barack Obama, who they believe was going to change their lives. And whether anybody thinks the mayoral candidates this time are worth that effort, we're going to see. And of course, if you want to vote for me, the effort's even greater because you got to manage the write-in process. So we'll see.
Mike, last week you had said that you thought all this stuff was too damaging and that you couldn't recover from that. How has that changed now?
Well, you know, you can see the reaction. I never believed. When I came back here and I said to the campaign team, I assumed they would have all gone on to the other candidates. Of course, the other candidates all approached him immediately. Nobody left. They all wanted to stay. So I don't know whether you guys weren't wanted or... but the whole team's still here ready to go. So there's no question that the depth of support for me in this community is beyond anything I understood. And I feel that I need to make that same commitment. And even though it's going to be harder to do a write-in campaign than it would have been otherwise, I'm going to go do it every day.
And once, if you were to be in the top two, you would legitimately be on the general election.
Right. But the top two vote getters are printed on the November ballot. So we only have to do this write-in thing once. Because you got to show people, print Mike Duggan in the blank, and fill in the oval, and you got to do both. And if people print the name and don't fill in the oval, it won't be counted. So we have got a lot of education work to do to make sure people know it's a two-step process. Print Mike Duggan in the blank, fill in the oval.
So, Mike, it does have to be exactly Mike Duggan, or as
No.
you said, it can be Michael?
Again, the question is voter intent. So Michael Duggan, or if a G is dropped or something, that's counted.
Okay.
M. Duggan probably be counted. I mean, that's ultimately done by the Board of Canvassers. The question is, did what they do indicate the voter's intent to vote for me? And if it is, it'll be counted.